Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Cancer Decoded on 2A, and we are grateful to have you here to have another conversation. As always, we say we're trying to provide both information and comfort to a world community that is eager to get the best information about cancer. As always, joined by our intellectual and spiritual guide to all of this, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong. Doctor, welcome back. Grateful to you for being part of the program.
Thanks, sir.
Easy chicken.
This is an episode that occurs at two distinctive things that are super important and a good confluence for us. First of all, lots of news in the world of cancer, some positive, some negative, and we'll talk about that both with the doctor and with our guest. And our guest is someone who represents the best of American search for a healthier life, who's both in his professional life and in his personal life has really been a leader in trying to figure out how to make America healthier. And by doing what Dr. Patrick does, which is not being wedded to the old ways of doing things. If the old methods are not making us healthier, and in fact, they're making us less healthy, whether it's cancer or nutrition or anything else, being open to new paradigms, new information, new directions. So Callie Means will be here with us in just a moment. He works with the Trump administration, with Secretary Kennedy in the White House on all of these issues, and along with his sister has been one of the, again, real leaders of the MAHA movement to break out from old paradigms. So we'll have to talk to Callie in a moment. Doctor, I want to start by talking to you about some of the latest news, including something that happened in the United Kingdom with regulatory approval that close to your home and to your heart, but also a significant development. So explain what was approved in the UK and why it's significant, if you would.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. You know, the drug that already was approved in the United States in 2024 is a drug called Anktiva, which is sort of collectively called by everybody now the BioShield. And the idea being this drug, together with BCG, has now shown in bladder cancer remarkable activity. And in our patients with naive bladder cancer, we now have patients, as I said in the previous shows, 10 years out and still living with their bladder. That's a revolution in the sense that what we've done is create a chemotherapy-free treatment in patients with bladder cancer, save their bladder, save them from the procedure. And the UK authorities, in less than 5 months from the time they received it, approved it, which is incredibly exciting.
Okay. Talk about regulatory approval. Are other countries, where does the United States rank in terms of regulatory approval, efficiency, safety, et cetera?
Well, I think this is one of the reasons I'm really hopeful that Secretary Kennedy and the team and Marty McCary and Vinay Jay, the teams that's in there, recognize that in order for us to continue to lead the world, in order to be the head of innovation, the obstruction cannot be at the regulatory level. That has been my fear. And, you know, obviously, just to give you some perspective, I've one of the few in the world that has understood for 35 years how to work with the FDA. My first company called American Pharmaceutical Partners, where I made every injectable drug that one could think of in the hospital and was responsible for the safe heparin. During that phase, we tried to bring manufacturing, and it was very, very productive. And we got about 70 FDA approvals in my 10-year career before I sold that to Fresenius. We then got another drug called Abraxane approved, which is now for breast cancer, lung cancer, pancreatic cancer. That took 6 to 7 years. Anktiva, which is this drug, now has taken 10 years. So we have data now, 10-year data. I think science is moving so fast that if we don't realize it, we will fall behind the world from innovation, especially China, and especially countries like the UK and Europe, where the regulatory status is very different, the way they understand the need to have regulatories move fast so that we can get innovation. So together with AI and together with our much more deeper understanding, I really believe that the obstruction to innovation is not going to be the fact that there's not enough innovation in America. There's amazing innovation. The obstruction is going to be if you go into this old standard ways, especially since the last 4 years, and maybe this new administration will change that. It should not take 10 years to get a drug approved.
Yeah. Okay. Let's look at another development. This number 3, please. You and I, since we started our conversations about these issues before the program began, have been in some colloquy. You as an expert, me as a concerned citizen, about the COVID vaccines and all of the different health trends, data regarding children and adults, and in the wake of the administration of vaccines that were produced very quickly, produced without the normal regulatory process, and concern that perhaps they've had side effects, they've had an impact, and cancer is obviously one concern. So talk about this study and why it's significant.
Well, the flip side of it, right, is we need to actually show that these drugs are safe. So one of my concerns has always been the unknowns, and the mRNA vaccine is very, very new, and there's lots of elements around it, very complex elements, the spike protein, the cleavage sites inside that spike protein, we'll talk about that. The fact could this RNA become DNA, meaning could it actually produce? Does it create inflammation? Does it persist? Is it from the vaccine or from the infection? Now there's a lot of evidence coming out on the vaccine side, which is worrying, that multiple injections, what this paper showed was multiple injections of the vaccine created a form of a thing called IgG4, which allows then, frankly, almost immunosuppression. And so what you begin to see, the combination of immunosuppression and inflammation and persistence really bodes badly for anybody with cancer, any cancer, and this happens to be pancreatic cancer. I've just tweeted today, because you're right, there's a lot of news that come out, and maybe with Callie we can talk a little bit more about that. But not only is it with pancreatic cancer, we're now seeing prostate cancer, we're now seeing germline cancers, we're seeing pancreatic cancer in younger people. We're seeing, that's what I'm really scared about, the what I call this turbo surging of cancer in young people. And is it related, has it been related to the COVID, either virus and or vaccine? I think that's a really important subject for us to talk about and to get through that based on scientific data. There's a lot of hearsay, but the more I read, and I tweeted some pretty complex stuff today on the temperance and the spike in the furin cleavage. But we need to, and that's the purpose of a show like this, Mark, to decode it, to break it down, to go slowly through it, not to scare the population, but to say, okay, you've got to face it, because if indeed we are facing the potential of what I call the non-infectious pandemic of cancer, and in young people, we better be not only aware of it, but how we're going to address it. And that's really what I want to actually decode, I suppose, these issues.
Yep. We can't hide from the truth. We can't hide from the science, but we need the best science. And we need to, particularly for parents of kids who have the suspicion, whether it's cancer or some other issue that they think arose from the vaccine, we need to know the truth, and we shouldn't hide from it. All right, here's how it's going to go. Callie's here. He'll come in and join us. I'm going to talk to him a little bit about his history with dealing with the issue of cancer. And then I'm going to turn it over to the two experts, and I'll, like the rest of you, sit and watch and wonder at the level of conversation that will occur. And then your questions, as always. If you've got a question about a specific case, a general science question for these two great men, please raise your hand. We'll get to you before too long. But if you're here on the two-way platform, and if you're watching on X or on YouTube, feel free to let your friends know that can watch now. And this episode, like all our episodes, will also be available on demand on YouTube. So with that, let's bring in Callie Means, who's been on two-way before, but not on this program. And I know from reading about Callie and from the look on his face, and I don't mean this in a negative way, because you're a handsome guy, that you are working very hard on behalf of the American people as a special government employee. And we're grateful to you, as busy as you are, for making time to visit with this community and to help us spread information and hope, as opposed to disinformation and fear. So thank you for coming back on.
Oh, thank you, Mark and Patrick. I'm excited to dive in.
Talk about your family's history with cancer and how that inspired you. And I'll say, background for those who haven't Googled or don't know, you worked in kind of establishment corporate disinformation. How about that for a summary? Working for corporate interests concerned about controlling government policy, putting corporate interests ahead of public interest. And from that experience, you decided to change course. So that's certainly one of the experiences that you had. I think you and I have talked about this, that informed your decision to be dedicated to public health and the MAHA movement. Talk about your family history and how that inspired you and your sister to be involved in these issues.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, I'm in the White House now, grew up down the road in DC. And at the time, early in my career, 15 years ago, thought it was the right thing to do, working for these big industries, pharma, and became disenfranchised if that was out of that for 10 years. But yeah, I'm here, Mark, because of cancer. My life changed in many ways when my mom called me in January 2021. And she just got a doctor's checkup. She did executive physicals at the Mayo Clinic. She was, had the best care. And they said a month before that she was healthy. She was great. She called me in January 2021 and said, she was crying and said, I'm going to die in the next couple of weeks. I have pancreatic cancer, stage 4. She had a pain in her stomach, went in to get a scan at Stanford Hospital near where she lived. And they texted her the next day saying stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And for me, I think, in my opinion, the biggest issue in the country, the biggest issue we faced was crystallized talking to her oncologist at Stanford. And they said that the pancreatic cancer was unlucky and it was a tough break. And I think that's a lot of how we talk about cancer. Oh, this is tough. But as we know, pediatric cancer is exploding. Cancer rates are exploding as Patrick just said, all these specific forms of cancer like pancreatic, which my mom had, that was what you read about in textbooks 50 years ago. People didn't really get it. Now you hear about it all the time. So it was really that question that, is this luck or is something happening? And, with the wisdom of my sister who studied at Stanford Medical School and was a surgical resident and left the system, kind of putting these pieces together, helping me put the previous things I saw together, there's clearly something happening. And you talk about vaccines, and that's something now we can talk about in a scientific way on the table, but it's just demonstrable. We've had the COVID vaccine. A child in the first year of life has gone from 3 to 31 shots since 1986 to now. Our food environment's changed dramatically. A child's diet is 70% ultra processed food. It was 0% ultra processed food 70 years ago. Our environment.
Callie, stop right there. Did you say it was 0%?
Yeah, 60, 70 years ago, close to 0% of a child's diet was ultra processed food. In France and Spain, today it's 15%. Here it's
that's a crisis right there.
So obviously food is a big issue. There's 80,000 novel chemicals that have been, brought into our environment in the past 50 years. Many of these make up, every attribute of modern life. They're not all bad, but it's certainly a factor. We get 2 hours less sleep in America than an average person did 100 years ago. We're constantly chronically stressed. There's just demonstrably a mass degree of factors that are impacting our biology. And that is clearly manifesting. And I see cancer in many ways as a branch of the tree of the fact that 60% of adults in America now have prediabetes, the fact that obesity is now, it's 75% of Americans are overweight or obese, and you go down the list, and it's demonstrably different in the United States. There was actually just a JAMA article on kids, how different it is in the US than other countries, but we're double the diabetes rates as Europe, we're double the obesity rates. I mean, there's something happening to our cells. And my mom, despite being told that she was healthy at the Mayo Clinic a month before the diagnosis, she was on 5 medications. She was on the standard rites of passage for an American, the statin for high blood pressure, the metformin for high blood sugar, the ACE inhibitor for high blood pressure. Each of those appointments was 15 minutes. This is normal. Take it. This is a preventative thing. So that's the framework, and really through the genius of my sister. And as my mom died 12 days later, she put this together from a medical perspective. And I think that's really the core of the MAHA message is we're at this fascinating time where I think we've lost track of the root cause. And I think clearly these root cause factors, that ultra processed food statistic, clearly have a lot to do with cancer. And then as Patrick talks so eloquently about and is leading the charge on, I think we're at the moment of where the next 5 to 10 years, just technologically with incredible breakthroughs, is going to be the most interesting time in human history as far as innovation. So we're grappling with these two things, and I think that's what the Trump administration, what's happening here. I think they're inviting a complex conversation about how we deal with the technological change and embrace that while also getting back to the basics.
And let me say three quick things, then turn you over to Patrick. First, I don't care if you disagree with Callie and the administration on policy prescriptions, but the facts he's laying out about the crisis, health crisis in America, you can't turn away from, you can't deny. And so grateful to you for highlighting it the way you did. Second is this administration has iconoclastic views and a powerful agenda in for you, Secretary Kennedy, and others. And it's incumbent upon the administration to explain why the things you want to do will be safe and better. And I know you know that, but I just want to have that as a frame here. It's great to describe the problem, but we need solutions that people can trust. And then lastly, we will take your questions. So Patrick and Callie will talk for a bit, and then we'll take your questions. If you want to be in on the conversation, please raise your hand. Patrick, I turn Callie over to you for your conversation about oranges or anything else you want to talk about.
Well, Callie, we've not met, but so pleased to meet you, and I'm so glad you're there with Senator Kennedy. And I think, if I may, first, I'm sorry to hear about your mother, but I think it's instructive. You know, I spent my entire life trying to cure pancreatic cancer. As you know, that's been since UCLA days. And it's maybe instructive in terms of what we're doing actually as doctors. And maybe one day I'll sit and talk to your sister about that. But even today, I mean, I'm literally always on a call, you know, and these are big names, you know, Sloan Kettering, MD Anderson, Stanford, UCLA. And the problem, without saying that, I think there's a circular dogma that keeps on going round because that's how we've been trained, or that's how we've been captured, so to speak, whether it be Big Pharma capturing, and frankly, sadly, even the FDA. So rather than talking about the politics of this, which must change, and if nothing else, shows like this will go into the details. But if it's not too painful for you, and I do understand if it is, what was the reaction of your doctors when your mother was diagnosed with cancer, and what did they suggest they do for her?
That was the other life-changing event. So not only did they say it was unlucky, they said we need all hands on deck to fight this. And they recommended biopsies and some invasive procedures. And you know, my sister, because of her connections, you know, we had the best oncologists at Stanford. And they basically are closing up their books and getting ready to leave the room. My sister said, hold on one second. These procedures you're recommending, what are the chances that it'll extend her life, or what would those do? And they never heard this question before. They sat down and thought for a bit, and they said, well, she's got stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She's going to die soon, but maybe a couple weeks, 33% chance, 33% chance neutral, 33% chance because she's so immunocompromised that it's going to be some complications and will decrease her life. So the best chance with these procedures that would keep her with COVID protocols in the hospital away from us is maybe extend her life a couple weeks, 33% chance. So my sister's like, no, we're bringing her home. And they were very upset. We almost had to sign, you know, going against medical advice. At home, she sat on the patio and she received hundreds of letters and emails from people that she's impacted in her life, and she read those. And you know, her final moments of consciousness, she asked us to, you know, drive her out, and we carried her. She was so weak, to the beach, and she embraced my dad and hugged him and thanked her for such a beautiful life. It was beautiful. And we would have missed that if we were the 99.9% of people that didn't have a Stanford educated surgeon who during medical training saw oncologists during her rotation there crying in the hallways because they felt so pressured to intervene, because if we went with those interventions, it would have made Stanford Hospital, you know, probably $1 million, mostly in taxpayer funded money. My sister spoke to the oncologist after my mom died and voiced her frustration doctor to doctor, and the oncologist broke down in tears. Obviously, the oncologists weren't thinking about my mom as a you know, cash generator, but the line, you know, as Casey was working in surgery, is you eat what you kill. And it's a demonstrable fact that doctors, and those doctors, their salary and many other incentives are predicated on doing more procedures. So it did kind of was very poignant to me, this aggressiveness, this drop everything, all hands on deck, let's fight this. Let's, even though those interventions wouldn't have even helped, where was that attitude? And again, Mark, I agree. We need to talk about the policies, but the fact that the Trump administration is opening this conversation and opening the conversation in America right now about why the hell aren't we fighting before people get cancer, before people get diabetes, before people get obesity? I do think that's really important. And that was really the message my sister and I wanted to share, is where's the urgency before all this stuff happens?
So I'm so glad you brought this up, right? Because this is what I've been seeing, and you hit the nail on the head. Look, all my oncology friends, and I come from UCLA, then I understand, and the MD Andersons and Sloan Ketterings of the world. But if you ask the oncologists, even in the private practices, that they get a base salary, but their bonus is like quadrupled based on the amount of chemo they used. So there is a sort of conflict um, that you sort of see in medicine. Look, if I were to share with you, really, Kelly, that we've now, if you said, okay, what I'd like to do is take this time and get your reaction to this, because you're right. I've been speaking across this country, and the pushback is so huge
Yeah.
because the disincentives to what we're doing are the early diagnosis, prevention, treatment. By the way, we completed the accrual of all our Lynch syndrome patients, the first prevention trial in the United States last week. If I were to say to you, I right now, as you and I sit here, have a patient exact same stage as your mother's, stage 4, alive, active, 6 years out.
Wow.
Senator Reid, 3, 4 years out, etc. Same treatment for Merkel cell, 6 years out. I've got bladder cancer patients, 10 years out now, still alive, with all their bladders intact. Head and neck cancer patients. And that the therapy is a universal therapy of protecting your immune system, which comes back full circle to what you're doing, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll come back to what's harming our immune system.
Mm-hmm.
The struggle I have, and that's why we're doing the show, the Cancer Decoded show with Mark, and I'm doing this in many forms,
Mm-hmm.
is how do I break this logjam all the way between medical practice, insurance companies, big pharma, who really don't really want to see this, and sadly, even the FDA. So let me walk you through that concept and get your reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out what they would offer your mother was chemotherapy, probably a thing called Folfox, which is 5-FU, five forms of chemotherapy. They would offer maybe radiation. And what happens in these pancreatic cancer patients, as you speak today, if you go to Mass General, go to Stanford today and said, what's the treatment? It's Folfox, or it's Abraxane gemcitabine. And I invented Abraxane, and I wanted to push down the dose of Abraxane. What that does immediately is it knocks out your NK cells and your T cells. It actually knocks out the cells that matter to actually overcome that cancer. So now you get the chemo, and they do a CBC, and they said, oops, you're anemic, and oops, you have low neutrophil count. So we're going to give you EPO for your anemia, and we're going to give you GCSF for your neutropenia,
Right.
so that we can give you more chemo.
Right.
And so they give you that as a pharmaceutical drug, and then they give you more chemo, which knocks out more of your neutrophils, and now you are in this intolerable, horrible, painful situation where you've not prolonged life whatsoever. That's what I grew up with as a surgeon at UCLA, and that's what I grew up as. And I said, there has to be something wrong here. And the whole thing that's wrong here is that we've been treating cancer as if cancer is a disease when in fact the disease is the collapse of the immune system. And the collapse of the immune system, we'll talk about what causes that, whether it be the red dyes, whether it be the processed foods, whether it be the things that you're trying to now write. And I'm so glad. And that's why I got a lot of pushback when I supported Bobby very publicly on my ex as the HHS secretary. So the pushback now is the understanding that in fact the disease is the disease of the immune system and cancer is merely a symptom, not the root cause. And you raise the issue of what is the root cause. My challenge, and I hope to meet with you and your sister and work through this challenge, because I literally just came back from the FDA and we just got our approval in UK in 4.6 months of this BioShield, where people are now recognizing that whether you have sepsis, whether you have infection, whether you have diabetes, wound infection, or cancer, the root cause is the damage of the immune system. Now you have to get to the root cause of that. What damages the immune system? And I'm so glad that's what you're actually taking on. So I just like your reaction to that, because what we're talking about is a paradigm change. But against great forces.
The first words of our book is my sister, or the book we wrote together in her voice, is her deciding at the end of med school, after being fascinated with the interconnected biology of the body and the immune system and all these interconnected, beautiful structures we have. A doctor, as we know, needs to choose between 42 specialties. We silo the body into these micro areas. She did head and neck surgery. And then the president of Stanford Med School, did an extra fellowship. So there's 82 subspecialties. And he, is at the pinnacle of medicine, but his whole life is focused on 2 square inches of the face. So you drill farther and farther and farther down. And, inevitably, like my mom, someone with cancer, she saw an endocrinologist for her prediabetes. She saw a cardiologist. She saw all these specialists who never talked to each other. So I do think you're hitting at, to me, what is a core of this conversation. And to Mark's point, I do think we are in the making the argument phase. I do see MAHA as a 10 to 15 year bridge we're building to a system where we don't silo the body so much. 90% of medical costs go to chronic conditions. And I think there's a strong argument that the root of those are not just these siloed issues, a dermatology issue, a heart issue, a brain issue. There's really an interconnected core. So I do think that's what we're pushing the medical system to realize. I think that's just the demonstrable truth. We have a system that's well over 120 years old of how we silo everything, built by Rockefeller. We can talk about that history. Then you kind of bring to the regulatory structure. And I'll just speak for myself, just high level, how I see it. And you brought up the FDA. I think the real problems in the medical system are the NIH. You basically have the research NIH go to the FDA approving things, and then to CMS, which in my mind basically sets the parameters for the reimbursement and what the standard of care is. And I think there's a problem at each one. The NIH, by our estimates, 95% of it is not looking at the root cause. They're not asking why people are getting cancer. They're not asking why people are getting Alzheimer's. I can't find studies asking those core questions. They're not asking about the root cause right now. There's billions being spent on Band-Aids for those. There's $200 billion spent a year on cancer care. That's all accepting cancer is happening and basically how do we manage it? And we're using protocols like chemotherapy that were invented decades ago. So there hasn't been that much advancement in the clinical practice. The NIH is accepting disease as it is and not asking root cause. Then you get to the FDA, and as you said, I mean, we can say it directly, it's completely captured. There's an invisible hand that's preventing diagnostic tools. It's extraordinary. There's a war on preventative scans. There's huge red tape for any type of tool to help you see what's going on inside your body. And obviously, a big bias and a structure that I think benefits big pharma, where innovative therapies have massive red tape. I think one interesting thing that might be surprising to people about what Bobby's saying about MAHA is it's not about necessarily even anti-therapeutics, anti-drugs, overregulation. We actually are on the verge of tremendous innovation, even if it's risky. But the problem then, I think, is that you get to CMS, where I really feel like not just the COVID vaccine, but a lot of medical interventions are essentially mandated. You have medical codes where those Stanford physicians who aren't talking about more innovative solutions, they're going to basically what their codes say. And our codes created by the American Medical Association, a pharmaceutical lobbying group, which really steer the incentives to the $5 trillion that we spend on healthcare, are really problematic. Do not give people flexibility. Do not give people flexibility to explore alternative cures. Do not give or new cures or risky things. I think as long as people have correct information, are able to make informed consent, they should be much more empowered to figure out the best option for them. So there's been a real assault on innovation. And I think that mix of both figuring out the root cause, but also grappling with the incredible innovative potential of our country right now, while ensuring strict patient consent, informed consent, is a big challenge. And I do think the administration is really trying to tackle that. The one last thing I'll say, Patrick, you really resonate of that idea that, some interventions with cancer then trigger more, and you're playing this whack-a-mole game. I mean, that's everything. There's a 40% C-section rate right now. Most women aren't opting for the C-section, but friend after friend, it's like, what happened? Well, they put this one drug in and that caused an emergency. And then I had to go on this drug, the Pitocin and this, and then it was a big disaster and they had to cut me open. Now they're prescribing Ozempic with SSRIs because antidepressants cause weight gain, but then the black box warning on the Ozempic is actually more depression. So you're going back and forth. All of these interventions are causing this whack-a-mole situation, which we really need to grapple with. And I think it's from the system that really incentivizes these things and actually incentivizes the doctors to have these issues, because the more issues that happen, the more money people make.
And I think, just for the audience, you and I understand coding. Coding, just so you know, is unfortunately how our electronic medical record has been established together with the doctors, is many transactional devices where every procedure you do to code. So the more procedures you do, the more therapies you give, the more money you make. So the incentives are completely perverse. There is no code, by the way, for health.
Mhm.
Think about that. I've always said that for 20 years. There is actually no CPR code that says, okay, if you keep you healthy. And so the idea being, you're completely right. And I want to raise, look, I brought this with me and I tweeted this. This 2011, UCLA talked about the toxicology of food dyes.
Mhm.
So this has been known. Red 3 dye causes cancer in animals. These dyes are from coal tar and petroleum. Otherwise, they're good. They come out coal tar and petroleum.
Right.
3 dyes, red 40, yellow 5, and yellow 6, have been found to be contaminated with benzidine and carcinogens. Yet, it's taken us forever. Europe beat us to this, understood this smartly. And again, when you talk about being captured and why has the regulatory authorities allowed this? And today I just tweeted about citrus red orange. I don't know, Mark, if you want to put up.
Let's put up the oranges. As sickening as this is to look at, let's put it up.
And I don't think everybody realized that oranges are not orange. They dyed with a citrus red dye. And why? Why do we need that is carcinogenic? So this is really I think why the public needs to understand from physicians.
And Patrick, that's every orange grown in Florida is treated that way, right?
Yeah, I think it turns out, I mean, I know this is crazy that I'm have to begin to study this. It depends on the season. So the early part of the season, when it's not that orange, they dye it.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is some oranges that are green, but they're actually sweet if they're green. So, but the public wants oranges, so they dye it and they put dye in it. The candies in the UK today, you can pick up a candy with a red dye in it, but it's not red dye, it's beetroot. So food additives. So I think this is a challenge that people like Cassie would now need to take on, and Callie need to take on. I think the opportunity to really educate through programs like this is not a political thing. This is for your health. And what is the root cause of cancer? And you ask all of this and together with the microplastics. Soon I'm going to get very deep into the COVID story, the mRNA vaccines, the spike protein, but maybe that's for a different time. But I think these are all the root causes.
We've got a number of hands up, so I look forward to the two of you having conversations well into the future, because I think your collaboration is going to be super important for the country. And Callie, I'll just say, I hope it doesn't sound presumptuous. I can't help but believe your mom would be so proud of the two of you taking what is a tragedy for your family and something so hard and show stopping in your lives and dedicating both of your lives to public health the way you have. It's a great memorial for her. And as I said, I can only imagine how proud she'd be of the two of you. Let's go to community members again. As always, tell us where you're calling us from and questions or comments for Dr. Patrick and for Callie. And we'll start with Rick. Rick, go ahead and unmute and tell folks where you are and what's on your mind.
Yeah, I'm in Central Texas, and thank you so much for accepting me to talk. I have adrenal carcinoma for 5 years now, and I've tried everything, 2 major surgeries, all the chemos, immunos, and nothing's working. And so I've been listening to Dr. Patrick for months now, tried to get into some kind of program. Listened to Gretchen last week, and she said, fight, fight, fight. And so I'm fighting to get in for treatment. And I just wondered, since my doctor is a corporate doctor and he will not communicate with BioShield, is there any way I can go around my doctor to get some treatment?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, but sadly, this is what we literally been talking about with Callie in this conversation. And I apologize on behalf of our little clinic in Los Angeles. We've asked the FDA for expanded access. They've given us expanded access, but really I don't want that. I want this to be available to the nation in real time. So I know you may have tried the cssifm.org, and we have as many nurses as we can. Quite literally, we're now up to 10,000 requests. Adrenal cell carcinoma is all treated. You should ask your doctor, and not challenge him, but ask your doctor a simple question. What is my absolute lymphocyte count?
Right, I have that. So I did that myself.
Okay.
From the last interview where the lady talked about how to get that from Quest.
And what is it?
I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's around 1,400.
Okay.
If that's correct or incorrect.
Yeah, it probably could be, and so that's good news for you,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. So look, I think I apologize for saying that, but you just have to try and look. I'm happy to talk to your doctor personally. I do that all the time. I personally see patients still, and I'm happy to talk to him to educate and let him say if there's a way. Where you live? You say you're from Texas?
Outside of Austin.
Okay, so maybe I can get the doctor in your Austin to get him the drug through this expanded access and treat you.
Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love that. My problem is that he works for a large corporation and will only do standard of care, and just kind of kicked me out of his office when I said I wasn't going to do any more chemo.
Oh boy. I can, but look, if he speaks to me and I can talk him to me, even if he wants to give you chemo as a standard of care, by giving Anktiva, this drug that will activate at least your NK cells and T cells, that will mitigate the loss of your ALC, and we provide that free. So it's not And so just let him call me.
Yeah, Rick, go ahead and DM me in the Zoom. DM me your email address, and we'll connect you to Patrick.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys are great. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you, Rick. Before you go, Callie, would love to hear your thoughts on just the general issue of how HHS and the administration is thinking about these bureaucratic issues where people aren't able to get care under the current system, whether it's health insurance or an obstinate doctor or whatever it is.
I think we're all backing up, not to get partisan here, but I think there's a interesting debate brewing, right? Where the Democrats around this big beautiful bill are essentially saying the healthcare system is great, and attacking Republicans for inserting some of these work requirements. And I think the argument that's brewing is that it's not about getting more people on Medicaid or really more how to spend in the existing system, that there's something really systemically wrong. When you combine the arguments being made, it is getting to an argument for a real wholesale change in health reform, where our system, we spend 4 times more than most European countries, and are living far less. There's something's clearly not working. So, clearly there's something very wrong with the fact that we're spending so much, but the fact that there's so much bureaucracy. The principle that I've talked a lot about, that the administration is talking a lot about, is patient flexibility. I really just do not think there's a market in healthcare to unleash entrepreneurs and innovative solutions, and give patients flexibility to choose where their healthcare spend goes. We're spending $5 trillion right now on healthcare. Medicaid alone is 1.3 trillion in spend. So there's money there, and it's not in a flexible arrangement to lead to the type of entrepreneurial activity on the provider side, but also allow patients to figure out the best treatment for them. So I'm sorry I don't have an easy answer. I do think we're grappling with this, and it's a big grapple because, I think, as Mark and Patrick have pointed out, I mean, this is just a massive, complex system that's the highest, it employs more people than any system in the country. It's the biggest industry. It's the fastest growing industry actually in the country. So there's a lot of reckoning here, and, being here at the White House, it's a lot of stakeholders who are, many of whom are very good people, but people that are very incentivized for the status quo.
So maybe, Kelly, I'd
yeah,
give you that story, if I may.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Or maybe you got a patient here or a audience member here, Mark. But I was where you were sitting there presenting to President Obama when the Obamacare was being pushed out, about to get pushed out. And I'm saying to him that if we don't create what I call an outcomes-driven care system, where you actually look at outcomes based on the science, and you can look at everybody's outcome in terms of their health status in real time in an interoperable system, you would not know what you're paying for. And the response was, no, we're going to put our money, $40 billion, into electronic medical records that don't talk to each other, of which electronic medical records were transactional, so to incentivize more procedures. So this is a long conversation, and Mark, maybe we should have another discussion on outcomes-driven care, where, frankly, the amount of money, as Callie was saying, we spend more money than anybody in the world. We have the lowest survival rate, lowest compared, one of the lowest. Think about that in the world compared to the other nations. So the ability to actually measure outcomes-driven care is here now. I mean, that is available here now.
Right.
You need a policy change where you actually reimburse based on outcomes, and this is where, with Dr. Oz and the idea at CMS and the changes that will happen. But I think that's why I'm so encouraged by the opportunity, really, in these next 4 years or so, to really get these changes made.
Yeah, we need creative entrepreneurs who don't believe the status quo is tolerable. Yeah, Callie, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, digging into the Affordable Care Act to Obamacare, it really is, it really trapped some really poor incentives. It actually talked a lot about outcomes-based medicine, and did set up some of these quality triggers. But when you dig into that, the outcomes are whether patients take their drugs. and whether they're adhering to the prescriptions from the top down, medical coding structure. Their outcomes are not based on actual health.
Exactly.
So that is actually how the medical system thinks today about outcomes prescribed by law. It also created this really perverse incentives where it constrained health insurers to 15% that they can only make in profit, essentially, medical loss ratio. But they're able to raise premiums to get that 15%. So it established this incentive where companies want more of that 15%, that 15% of a larger and larger pie, and premiums have exploded. So just structurally, we don't have a system right now that's prioritizing health, actually, because of that 15% larger pie dynamic. And this has been affirmed by leaders at the largest insurers in private conversations. When you ask them off the record, you are incentivized as an insurance company for your patients to be sicker. That is just true. They want costs to go up because then premiums can go up. So yeah, I know that's probably not very helpful, to a specific patient. But again, these are very known issues, very complex issues that we're working to untangle.
And the problem, these are known internally, right? So when you talk about upcoding, Mark, it's even worse than that, right? So the doctors are asked to upcode to get the patient to be perceived as a sicker patient so that they get actually paid more from CMS.
Right.
It's truly a circular, perverse system. But anyway, maybe we want to listen to your audience
Okay.
now.
All right, Rick, get us your information and the doctor will be in touch. Dan, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind for Callie, Means, and Patrick.
Thank you, Mark, and very grateful to you and Dr. Patrick and everybody in this community. I've been listening on the two-way platform for the last year, and I'm dialing in from Orange County, California. And just a little background, I'm calling on behalf of my father. He's fighting through two different types of cancer. One is prostate cancer, and the other is something called the GIST for short, gastrointestinal stromal tumor. The prostate cancer, he's on Lupron and it's more or less under control. But the GIST, he's now on the third treatment phase of what's called a KIT receptor chemotherapy. It's called Stivarga. He started on Gleevec, then it went to Sutent, and then now he's on Stivarga. And everything that you've been talking about, Dr. Patrick, I've noticed in my father in terms of, kind of winning the battle, but losing the war. The quality of life is difficult to watch on these different medications, and did a little bit of background in all the data from various tests that he's had, and his lymphocyte count, absolute lymphocyte count, is hovering in the between 800 to 900. It hasn't been above 1,000 for well over 2 years now, and so I've done a little research, and we've talked to his oncologist about any kind of immunotherapies that can be combined perhaps with the type of KIT receptor drugs that he's on, and he's really kind of brushed it off, unfortunately.
Okay.
So curious from your perspective.
Yeah, let me interpret for the rest of the audience, because I think that's really important. So GIST is basically a form of a neuroendocrine tumor. The fact that he has prostate cancer, and you should check whether he has Lynch syndrome, whether you're in the family of Lynch syndrome, right? Because when you get these different cancers. But having said that, the GIST that you have, which is the neuroendocrine tumor, is responsive to these kinase inhibitors. But, and this is what's exciting, these neuroendocrine tumors are very, very responsive to natural killer cells. In fact, I've worked with NCI over the last decade now with Jeffrey Schoen's lab, and your father, for example, could come and we are able to pull out his blood and grow billions of these natural killer cells, put them in. But Anktiva does exactly that. The fact that his lymphocyte count is 900 means he's what we call lymphopenic. Now, when you think about that and you speak to your doctor about that, explain to him that those lymphocytes mean the natural killer cells and the T cells. The only cells that matter that's going to kill or attack is just cancer. The fact that they are low is because of the fact of the chemo and the kinase inhibitors that he's been on. So it makes completely nonsense. I don't mean it in a pejorative way, but no sense, that the only cells that matter in your body to kill this cancer is the natural killer cells and the T cells as measured by the ALC. Callie, it's amazing. Nobody's measured ALC in 75 years of medical history. They've measured ANC and hemoglobin because there's drugs, but it's never been a drug ever to unlock the natural killer cells and T cells until we got our drug approved in 2024. So I'm not trying to talk to you about the drug. I'm trying to tell you, doctor, about the concept. And the concept is find ways. And there are people actually working on natural killer cells around the country. You in Orange County, ask your father to see if we can go to Hogue, which is in Newport Beach, where we partner with, or figure out a way to come to our clinic in El Segundo, Los Angeles. But again, I'm happy to talk to your doctor because it's a simple educational process. That the only cells that matter in your body is your natural killer cells and your T cells that will kill the cancer. It is measured by a simple test called the CBC, which everybody's now doing, thank God, and looking at ALC, and your ALC is below normal. If you're below 1,000, you're really in trouble with regard to that, because without T cells and NK cells, you don't have the tools to kill the cancer.
Callie, a question for Dan, if you'd like, or a comment if you'd like.
We can go the next way. I can't
Okay.
add much more to Patrick.
Most great.
Okay.
I know
That
others have
that was a massive
other questions as well. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Dan, thank you. And again, send us your email address in the chat, and we'll connect you if you'd like. Thank you for that. Okay, Paul, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind for Dr. Patrick and for Callie Means. Just hit unmute if you would. There you go.
Trying to unmute there. Hopefully I'm unmuted now. There
Yes,
were
sir.
a few people who were ahead of me, so I'm happy to ask my question, but
Go ahead.
okay. Thank you, Mark and Dr. Shun, for facilitating, and Callie as well. I have a regulatory question. Beyond RMAT and expanded access, is there a pathway for full commercial BioShield approval in 2025? We saw rapid approval during the pandemic for COVID vaccine. Is there a similar pathway? I don't know, emergency access or some sort of regulatory pathway for this year in 2025 to give American citizens full BioShield? And it's a question for both Dr. Soon-Shiong and Callie as well. Thank you.
Great question, Paul.
Well, you put me in a hot spot here, Paul. I don't think I can. I know the answer to that, but I think this is where Kelly and I can have a private conversation afterwards. And you're right. I'm just so you know, I'm surprised that you know about RMAT and expanded access, but you obviously come from a regulatory background. So RMAT is what the FDA gave us, which is regenerative advanced therapy approval. And when I got the RMAT in December, I was really excited about that because it meant you really fall into these accelerated processes. I will have a separate conversation with Callie and the team about my experience. I just came back from Washington and the FDA the last couple of weeks, and it was not what I expected, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
I think it is so critical. This drug is approved already, right? It's approved for exactly where you talk about these little circumstances. It's approved for bladder cancer, and we have patients now free of bladder cancer. It's 8,000 doses given. 80,000 doses are already being given safely. So the opportunity for this, if it is understood, and this is the whole big if, that the treatment is the treatment of the immune system. And the immune system does not ask the question, do I have bladder cancer, pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer, or sepsis or COVID? The immune system says, where's this rogue cell and I want to go and kill it. We were born with this natural killer cell. It's 450 million years old in evolution. It is what I call the qubit of the body in terms of quantum. And that's why I call this thing quantum oncotherapeutics. It is the balancing cell in our body that actually protects us, on the one hand, from autoimmune disease, on the other hand, from cancer, and on the other hand, from sepsis. It's a very difficult concept to get through the regulatory process. Nobody's ever treated something to prevent something. I thank you for the question. It is something that I personally, for the rest of my career as a physician, going to want to take on to make this available to the American public. As you know, I've been in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, and now UK, as you see, and soon in South Africa. This is where I'm pursuing this so that it's at least available globally. but we need to make it available to Americans. And this expanded access is very difficult because you see doctors who don't want to even hear about it, maybe because they're not getting reimbursed or for whatever reason. And I think this is something I have to go to Washington and continue to make our case.
Callie, more generally, one of the things anyone who's a student of President Trump knows, when there's an extra level of emotion when he talks about something, and right to try is something that he's been a long time advocate for. So talk about Paul's question more generally and what the administration's posture is towards speeding the regulatory process where it makes sense and giving people the right to try a drug if the alternative is death.
Yeah. So without getting specific, I do think, again, this is a little bit of a maybe surprising part about what Secretary Kennedy's talking about, what this administration is talking about. Because on one end, it's obviously, one could even say, distrust of pharma that's certainly in this system right now, but it's not an anti-innovation or it's not an overregulation message. Again, the real issue is the cost of drugs, which President Trump has talked a lot about, and the lack of market dynamics there, and the sense of the mandating, the kind of forced down standard of care, the lack of informed consent. I'll tell you, as Patrick knows better than anyone, the FDA is very antiquated systems, and we're on the verge of, I think, incredible innovations. Marty McCary has already talked about AI reviewers, expedited waivers, and I think there's a large sense that this can be 4 years of dramatic, smart deregulation and innovation at the FDA, with a particular emphasis to enable entrepreneurial and cutting edge treatments that are obviously coming down the pike. So. Again, as long as that's balanced with clear patient consent without mandates, with people being able to make their own decisions, there's risk every direction, right? Anything you do, our system right now is very risky. So I would not say it's an over regulatory posture. If anything, I think they're looking for smart deregulations and to speed up these things. I think it's very clear that we're on the verge of and there's so many people doing great innovation. So that's the overall posture here. And, when it comes to Mark's point about the emotion, I mean, there's a lot of talk about cancer at the White House. I mean, Richard Nixon declared war on cancer, like 50 years ago, and said it was going to be over in 5 years. I mean, this has been a losing war. And I know the administration wants to unleash solutions.
Paul, thank you.
The good news, Kelly, was when I met with the president in Riyadh. I think he's very aware of the spy shield, and I think you're right. I think Nixon tried to win the war, and we're now on the precipice of winning the war, and I think that's a real opportunity for this administration with us to help get this out to the American people.
Jen and Beth, we've got just a few minutes of Callie's time left, so I'd love for you both to just briefly ask your questions and let both Callie and Patrick respond, if you could, just so make sure you get your voices in here. But Beth, go ahead, just if you can have a brief question, and then Jen.
Hey, Callie, I wanted to tell you that I'm so appreciative that you met with Nina Teicholz, and she posted on X, and I just love the fact that you're giving her a voice and help and fostering the understanding that the nutrition guidelines are like absurd. And then for Dr. Patrick, are you familiar with Thomas Seyfried from Boston College and Jason Fung from Toronto and their hypothesis that cancer is not a genetic disease, that it's actually a metabolic disease? And I'm kind of getting the sense, I haven't done enough research on your work, but I'm getting the sense that you too believe that it's a metabolic disease. And in the front of Good Energy, Robert Lustig talks about the importance of the mitochondria and the importance of it. And I know that Casey and Callie also are promoting the understanding of how important the mitochondria is for understanding disease. And that's certainly what Jason Fung does. And Thomas Seyfried has written volumes on this. So
okay, Beth,
I just would love to hear.
Okay, really good, Beth. Jen, real quick, if you could add whatever you wanted to ask and let them both respond as we close, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. I have, my mom was a 53-year survivor of metastatic breast cancer. Her sister is a 46-year survivor of metastatic breast cancer. My sister did die of metastatic breast cancer, but due to complications. So my basic question is does seem to be a genetic component to getting cancer. Could there also be a genetic component to surviving cancer?
Jen, thank you. Callie, I'll let you comment first and then Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, I think Patrick has done groundbreaking research and has obviously talked about the links to the immune system. In our book, we talk about this general concept of metabolic health, which to me is really a barometer for a lot of root cause pathways that are being disrupted by environmental factors. And I think the core point is that it's obvious that external factors are leading to cancer, factors that are dysregulating our evolutionary biology of cells. Stephen Miller, actually, who's known for some other things, and Mark knows, I'm sure, actually gave this really eloquent speech. He's very Maha, and at a Maha event, he made the point that the U.S. has the highest cancer rates in the world. It's a disease of civilization. Our closest animal to us, chimpanzees, I think we share 99.9% of DNA. They're out in the wild. They have sub 1% cancer rates. But humans, Patrick, I think it's like 50% or something in their lifetime, and then I think dogs are about 50% plus who we have subjected to our same ultra processed food and things like that. So there's clearly something happening at that root cause level, which is our main point. I think we obviously know what some of those factors are, but we need to steer the healthcare system to recognizing that too, and both in just simple interventions and hopefully therapeutics that aren't just focused on managing the condition, but really focused on getting to the root cause.
Patrick, before you answer, I'm so sensitive to Callie's time because an hour of his time is extremely valuable, and we're very grateful to you for spending it with us. We hope you'll come back and again, whether you agree with Donald Trump personally or not, whether you think everything Callie said makes sense in terms of prescription, this is the first movement in modern American history to really focus on it, and Callie and his sister are first among equals along with Secretary in getting the country to understand that the status quo is unsustainable for ourselves, for our kids. So we're very grateful to you for the hour and for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Patrick. Talk soon.
Thank you. Patrick, if you want to close us out and respond to Beth and Jen and then tell us what to look forward to, we'd appreciate it.
Well, the answers to both questions, frankly, is all of the above. So let me just talk about when you really said the root cause is your immune system. What we don't realize is the metabolic function of a body actually affects the immune system. The microbiome affects the immune system. Your health, the sunlight affects the immune system. The rest that you have affects the immune system. The exercise, what you eat, because it becomes part of the microbiome, affects the immune system. So it's not as simplistic as any one single cause, and then you have a genetic, whether you have BRCA, whether you have Lynch, whether you have genetic predisposition, that also affects the immune system, the ability. So the immune system is a finely balanced, that's why we live as human beings, actually, a finely balanced tool that says we have killers and we have suppressors. And if you go off kilter, the suppressors beat the killers, and all of a sudden you have cancer. So when I say that cancer is a symptom and the actual root cause of your disease, whether it be infection, sepsis, arthritis, lupus, is the immune system. Now, let me go very specifically what I think is a very scary finding that I'm now aware of. When you talk about the mitochondria, we have now seen very recently that this damn tumor has an ability to put nanopores out into the mitochondria of your cells, of the T cells, and suck out the energy of those mitochondria and make those T cells energic. That is how sophisticated it is, where it's hand-to-hand combat at a cellular level that's going on. And if we are now for the first time beginning to understand with exquisite detail this immune system. And we have tools now for the first time to fight it. That's the hope that we now truly bring to the world, that because of our scientific understanding, there's going to be a leap very quickly, and I mean in the next 3 to 5 years, of changes in the paradigm of how we treat patients with cancer. So I think this has been a great episode, Mark, where we've crossed over from food to dyes to metabolic to cancer, and most importantly, in my mind, the obstruction is going to be the issue of getting it educated, both the doctors and the regulatory folks in Washington.
Great. I want to thank Beth and Paul and Jen with questions, and Rick and Dan. I've got both your messages, and Dr. Patrick and his team will be in touch with you to help you with your individual cases. And obviously, incredibly grateful to Callie Means for joining us and giving us that hour, and Dr. grateful to you for, as always, guiding us through us. And we'll be back in a week with another episode and another great guest and more conversations. And again, please tell your friends and family if they want to be part of this community. We welcome them here, whether they want to watch on the two-way platform to be able to participate directly or watch on YouTube. We want to have a pretty big aspiration. We want to build the largest active community in fighting cancer that the world has ever seen through this program. That's our goal. Doctor, thank you. Great to see you, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning on Two Way for the morning meeting. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.